DCEP Topic Talk. My name is Brad Williams, and our discussion today is about legislative disability priorities for 2018. I'd like to point out that these are all state legislative priorities. My guests are Megan Parker from the New York Association on Independent Living, Catherine Carroll, Esquire, from the Center for Disability Rights, and Frank Pennisi from the Southern Tier Independent Center. Thank you for joining us today. First issue I'd like to discuss is the source of income bill, making it illegal for a landlord to discriminate against a tenant based on their source of income. Why is this bill important?
Hi, Brad. This is Megan. I think that this bill is so important to people with disabilities because we are overwhelmingly unemployed or underemployed, and so really rely heavily on either Social Security, disability, or often a rental subsidy such as Section 8 to afford our rent. But currently, landlords are able to turn people down based on their source of income. And so just because somebody doesn't get paid wages from a job but instead gets alternative forms of income, landlords are able to turn people away. When you combine that problem with the lack of affordable, accessible, and integrated housing, particularly in New York, it can become almost impossible for people with disabilities to find housing. And so we feel strongly that if we add this as a protected class into state law, that at least for those people who have some kind of a support and can afford the rent, that they won't be turned down once they find an appropriate apartment. This would really go a long way to helping people be able to get appropriate housing in the community.
So where is this bill as we near the end of session?
So this bill, there are actually several versions of it, but just a couple of weeks ago, Governor Cuomo actually introduced what they call a program bill, and it has a similar version or a same-as version has been introduced in the Assembly, and it is currently going through the committee process, and so we are very hopeful that it will pass the Assembly by the end of session. However, we will certainly need to keep advocating in support of it to make sure that happens.
Okay, thanks, Megan. Next, let's talk about the paratransit fare parity bill. Why is this bill needed?
Hi, Brad. So this is Catherine. So paratransit services are provided as a complement to fixed route services in communities, but as much as we'd like them to be, fixed route services are not accessible to all, and so people with disabilities rely on paratransit. And so currently, there are minimum requirements for the provision of paratransit services federally, and those requirements allow the paratransit provider to charge a higher fare for their services. But when you think about it, this is basically discriminatory against people with disabilities because they rely on these services and use paratransit because they are unable to use the fixed route system. So the fare parity bill for paratransit would require that the fare not be greater than the base fare for adults using the fixed route system.
All right, and where is this bill as we near the end of session?
So right now we have a bill in the Senate, but sadly no same-as bill in the Assembly. So this issue is stagnant for the time being.
Okay, thank you. We have two tax credits that are important. Who can explain the benefits of the small business tax credit bill for people with disabilities?
I can. This is Frank Pennisi. The tax credit bill for small businesses is for small businesses that hire people with disabilities. It's an incentive. And this is important because the great majority of businesses that hire people with disabilities are small businesses. Small business is defined as any business with 100 or fewer employees. This tax credit is larger than the existing tax credits. It can be up to $5,000. It can be rolled over from one year to the next. And the most important thing about this bill is it uses the New York State Human Rights definition of disability rather than requiring someone to be a consumer of Access VR, OPWDD, etc. The existing tax credits, it's often the hoops people have to jump through to get the paperwork done for the business to get the credit. A lot of businesses don't even bother. They say it's not worth all the hassle. This way, if a person has a disability as defined by the human rights law, that's all you need, a doctor's note. And this would also allow, there are a number of people with disabilities who get jobs on their own who don't go through a state agency, and those employers are currently not eligible for tax credits for hiring them. Under this bill, they would be. So this would go a long way, I think, towards incentivizing businesses to look to hire people with disabilities, because to a small business, a $5,000 tax credit is significant, whereas to a larger business, it's a drop in the bucket.
Okay, that sounds great. Thanks, Frank. And where are we with the tax credit for inclusive home design, known as the Visitability Bill?
So the Visitability Tax Credit Bill would provide homeowners with a modest tax credit to help with the cost of making their homes more accessible. For example, if you needed to install a ramp to the front door in order to be able to get in and out of your home safely, you could do so and then apply for a tax credit up to $2,750. This bill has passed both houses of the legislature for the last 3 years in a row, but was vetoed by Governor Cuomo. This legislative session, the Assembly has once again introduced the same version of this bill. We expect that the Senate will likely do so again, though they have been trying to address some of the concerns raised by the executive. And so we'll see. There's a good chance that this bill will pass the legislature once again, but if it is the same version, it remains to be seen whether it could actually get signed into law.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Megan. Megan took care of where this particular bill is as we head towards the end of session and perhaps further. Frank, where is the small business tax credit as we near the end of session?
The small business tax credit bill is very likely to pass the Assembly in 2 weeks. In the Senate, it's less certain. Senator Addabbo, the sponsor, has put it on his priority list, and we're going from there to try and move it out of committee and onto the floor.
All right. Well, thank you. We oppose the assisted suicide bill in the state legislature. Please explain our opposition.
We oppose assisted suicide because laws allowing the practice cannot protect against the reality that some people will lose their lives without consent because of mistake, coercion, and abuse. These laws are especially problematic because of the profit-driven healthcare system that we live in. Assisted suicide offers a cheap option for getting rid of disabled people when we really should be offering treatment.
All right, and thank you very much. That is like perhaps the most succinct explanation I think I've heard. And where is this bill as we near the end of session?
There is an Assembly bill and a Senate bill. The Assembly Health Committee, where this bill is sitting right now, has recently heard a tremendous amount of testimony on this very topic. There may not be a vote given the apparent narrow split on the Health Committee on this issue. And I'll just mention as an aside that Assemblyman Cahill has introduced a bill to study this issue, which may have the effect of delaying further action on Assembly Bill 2383A. So that's where we are right now.
What do advocates need to do to support any of these bills or oppose the one?
I would suggest that if you are passionate about some of these issues, that you reach out to your legislators and make sure that they understand the issue and that they sign on to it. If you need more information about these bills and want to get more involved with advocacy, I strongly recommend you contact your local independent living center and speak with someone who does advocacy in that department. Most centers are involved with this advocacy in New York and would be happy to get other people involved in these efforts.
To target your interest in these issues to the right people, you can look up whether the committee where any of these bills is sitting and see who's sitting on that committee and contact those legislators in particular to let them know about how you feel about any of these issues.
All right. Anything else on the horizon that we need to briefly mention?
I have one. We are about to have a bill introduced in the Assembly to ban sub-minimum wage for people with disabilities, which is a major accomplishment.
Very nice.
We haven't broached it with the Senate yet, but this would make New York the 4th state in the country to do so.
That is great news.
Another piece of legislation which was recently introduced is to reestablish the Office for the Advocate for People with Disabilities. And this is because New York State has gotten rid of any form of advocacy for people with disabilities in state government. We used to have this. It's currently on the books in New York. We do have this office. However, there is no office. And so this bill would ensure that we have a director of the office and that people with disabilities have a voice in state government, which we currently do not. So we're really hoping this bill gets momentum and can pass the legislature.
Excellent.
I'm also happy to report that we expect a bill to be introduced in the Assembly by Assemblyman Skoufis fairly soon, and this would be a companion bill to a bill that's already in the Senate. We refer to it as Lead K, and it would address education and language acquisition among deaf children, because unfortunately deaf children do not get addressed in early education as much as they should be, and this bill would create a committee and study that issue so that we can better serve the deaf population.
Very good. I want to thank our guests again for sharing their information, which is extremely important, and I want to thank you for listening to our podcast today. Please join us for future podcasts and be an active member of the LD Center.